Be me, 25, fresh out of college, working at a mid-sized marketing firm downtown. I had just gotten my first real salary job, and even though it wasn't huge money, it felt like I'd made it. After years of scraping by with part-time gigs and unpaid internships, finally, I was the girl in heels walking into an office with glass doors and an actual receptionist who knew my name. It was entry-level stuff, proofing copy, sitting in on client calls, making endless PowerPoint decks, but I loved telling people I worked in brand strategy. It sounded so important, even though half the time I was just ordering sandwiches for meetings or correcting typos. Still, in my head, it was the start of something big. I threw myself into the career grind. Stayed late just to be seen by the higher-ups, bragged to my parents that I was climbing the ladder, and convinced myself the long hours would pay off. I remember buying a tailored blazer with my first paycheck and feeling like a CEO even though my title was basically glorified assistant. That's when Mike asked me out. I knew him through mutual friends. Nice guy, a little shy, the type who remembered small details you said in passing. He was working retail at an electronics store and talked sometimes about trying to start a small side business in tech. To me, it sounded like one of those someday dreams people say when they don't have a real plan. He drove this old silver Toyota Corolla, the kind with one hubcap missing. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed ambition. To my 25-year-old self, that mattered more than it should have. One night, after a group hangout at a local bar, he pulled me aside. He looked nervous, but determined. "Hey, I was wondering if maybe you'd like to grab dinner sometime. Just us?" It threw me for a second. I wasn't used to guys asking me out that directly. Usually it was more casual, like, come over and chill. Mike was different. He was actually offering to take me somewhere, sit across a table, and talk. For a brief moment, I hesitated. Part of me respected the way he asked. But then that career-focused voice in my head kicked in. You can't afford distractions. You're building yourself. You're not about to waste your time with a guy who doesn't even know where he's going yet. And then, there were my girlfriends, Melissa and Tara, always in my ear. Don't waste your time on some safe guy. You're too pretty for that. You've got potential. Date someone who matches it. He's nice, sure, but he's not on your level. So I smiled and gave Mike the polite brush off. You're sweet, Mike, but I'm really focusing on my career right now. Not looking for anything serious, total lie. I just didn't think he was exciting enough. His face changed. Not angry, not crushed, just a quick flash of disappointment. Then he nodded and said calmly, "Fair enough. I just hope you find what you're looking for." Then he walked away. I went back to Melissa and Tara, who were already smirking like they knew what I'd said. Melissa rolled her eyes and laughed. Can you imagine you two together? You'd be carrying him while he figured his life out. We ordered another round and toasted to freedom and focusing on ourselves. On the way home, though, I had this small nagging thought. Maybe I was being too harsh. Mike wasn't a bad guy. In fact, he was probably one of the more genuine men I'd met. But I pushed it aside. I told myself I had bigger things to chase. Promotions, pay raises, climbing that ladder. The men, the right men, would be waiting when I was ready. At 25, I thought opportunities, both in work and in love, were endless, especially for successful women like me. After turning Mike down, I told myself I'd made the right call. I was focused, ambitious, and on my way up. At work, things started happening fast. My boss gave me my own accounts, I got small bonuses, and I moved into a better apartment. For the first time, I could afford nice things without feeling guilty. New clothes, weekend trips, dinners that didn't involve coupons. I started making more than most of my friends. I'd walk past couples arguing in grocery stores or see co-workers rushing home to their kids and think, thank God that's not me. I truly believed I'd cracked the code. Success, independence, freedom. I didn't need anyone to complete me. The women chasing husbands and babies looked like they were settling for less. That's when Dylan came along. He worked in finance, drove a black BMW, wore tailored suits, and a watch that probably cost a month of my rent. He was confident in a way that felt addictive. When we first met at a co-worker's birthday dinner, he didn't even ask my name, just said, "You look like trouble," and smirked. I should have known better. But back then, confidence like his pulled me in instantly. He seemed like the kind of man who lived the same way I wanted to. Sharp, fast, untouchable. Our first few weeks together felt like a movie. Expensive restaurants, late-night drives through the city, staying at nice hotels just because he needed a change of scenery. I convinced myself this was what dating in my league looked like, but the cracks started early. He was constantly on his phone. He'd disappear for entire weekends with vague excuses. Meetings out of town, helping a friend. Once, I saw lipstick on his shirt when he tossed his jacket on my chair. When I asked about it, he just laughed. You're imagining things. Don't get clingy. I tried to brush it off, telling myself powerful men had options, and that I wasn't going to be one of those jealous girls who nagged. I wanted to look like I could handle it, like I was too busy winning at life to care. Then one night, after we'd been seeing each other for months, I went to surprise him at his condo. He'd mentioned being buried in work again, but when I got there, I saw him walking out of another car with a girl, a white Mercedes I didn't recognize. I stood there for a few seconds, heart pounding, then turned around and drove home. He didn't even call the next day. A week later, he texted like nothing had happened. Hey, been slammed. You good? I stared at the message for a long time and never answered. When I told Melissa and Tara, they both said the same thing. Forget him. You don't need that kind of drama. You're doing better than most people anyway. Keep your focus. We sat at a small place near my apartment, laughing too loudly, pretending everything was fine. Melissa said, "You're living the life. You've got freedom, money, no crying kids or cheating husband. You're winning." And I agreed, at least out loud. Back then, I measured my worth in paychecks and promotions. Every raise felt like proof I'd made the right choices. Every time someone said, "You're so independent," it hit like a drug. But when the workday ended and I went home, it always got quiet. Too quiet. I'd scroll through my phone looking for someone to talk to, realize there wasn't anyone I truly trusted, then tell myself that was fine. That this was the price of success. Sometimes, when I saw a couple holding hands on my walk home, I'd get that small, annoying tug in my chest. But I'd shake it off. They'll probably break up anyway, I'd think. I'm the one building something real. I told myself that enough times that it almost felt true. Somewhere along the way, the excitement faded. Years passed. Work was still steady, but it didn't feel like progress anymore. I was 30-something now, with a decent salary and a title that sounded better than it felt. Account manager. It looked good on paper, but day to day, it was the same cycle. Pitch decks, meetings, polite small talk with clients who barely listened. The new hires were younger, louder, faster. They came in fresh out of college, throwing around new buzzwords like they'd discovered fire. The bosses loved it. They'd call them innovative, bold, while I was the one asked to help polish their ideas. Translation. Do the real work quietly while someone else got the praise. When I was 25, being the late-night worker made me proud. At 30 plus, it made me tired. There's a big difference between driven and stuck, but you don't notice it until you're the one still there after everyone else leaves. I tried to convince myself this was fine. I made good money. I had freedom. I was still the girl who didn't need anyone, but it was getting harder to believe it. Dating was a different kind of dead end. Melissa had just gotten engaged. The same Melissa who used to say, "Marriage is a trap." Now her whole feed was ring shots and wedding countdowns. Tara already had a baby, a husband who seemed boring but dependable. When we met for lunch, she looked exhausted, but there was a calmness about her I couldn't relate to. They seemed way more fulfilled than I was. She asked how work was going, how dating was. I joked, still living the dream, work, wine, and peace and quiet. She smiled kindly. You always were the independent one. Then her baby started fussing, and she rocked him while talking to me, half distracted but content. I watched her hands, the way she held him without thinking. That soft rhythm, it felt foreign to me. A few months later, I decided to try dating again, mostly out of boredom. For some reason, even getting a decent date now felt harder. The apps were full of men who never replied or who vanished after a few messages. The ones who did stick around were either much older or strangely intense right away. So when I met Ryan, I actually felt relieved. He was my age, steady job in logistics, polite, normal, the kind of man you'd want to introduce to your parents. We met for dinner after work. He was easy to talk to. We laughed about our long commutes and bad bosses. For a minute, it felt comfortable. Then, somewhere between the main course and dessert, the talk turned serious. "Can I be honest?" he said. "I'm at a point in life where I want to settle down. I want kids. Not tomorrow, but soon. I'm done with the casual thing." I smiled politely, sipping my drink. "That's great for you," I said, "but I'm not really in that headspace. I like my life the way it is." He looked at me for a moment, not unkindly, just studying my face. "You don't ever think about it? Family, a partner?" I shrugged. "Maybe someday. But it's not a priority. I've worked too hard to slow down now." Something in his expression shifted. He nodded slowly and said, "I respect that, but I guess we're looking for different things." We finished dinner, talked about lighter stuff for a few minutes, and then he insisted on paying the bill. Outside, he gave me a quick, polite hug. "You're a great person," he said quietly. "I just know what I want, that's all." Then he walked away. I stood there watching him head toward his car, a small, unexpected sting building in my chest. He hadn't said anything wrong. He'd just been honest. Driving home, I told myself I'd done the right thing. I wasn't about to throw away my independence just to fit someone else's plan. Still, when I got back to my apartment and hung my coat, the silence hit harder than usual. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the couch, replaying the conversation. I told myself he was too serious, too traditional, but for the first time, it crossed my mind that maybe men like him weren't going to keep waiting around. Work didn't help. I was mentoring one of the interns, a bright girl named Jamie, 22, sharp, full of ideas. She reminded me of me at that age, except she didn't need to prove herself the way I did. People listened to her. They liked her energy. One afternoon, I overheard two co-workers talking in the break room. "Mike Reynolds' firm just signed a huge client," one said. "Crazy how far he's come. Didn't he used to work at some electronics store or something?" The name stopped me cold. Mike. I didn't say anything, just stood there, pretending to scroll on my phone while my chest tightened. I hadn't thought about him in years, not seriously anyway. But now his name floated around the office like it belonged to someone successful, someone respected. On the train home, I kept replaying the conversation. Mike Reynolds' firm. He'd really done it. I thought about that old silver Corolla, the way he said, "I just hope you find what you're looking for." Maybe he had. Maybe I was the one still looking. That night, I went digging through an old drawer, looking for something. I don't even know what. Inside an old notebook, I found a business card I'd saved years ago. Mike Reynolds, Tech Solutions. The corners were bent. I don't even remember why I kept it. I sat on my couch staring at it until my phone buzzed with a text from Tara. "Tara, you free this weekend? We're having people over. Bring someone if you want." I typed back, "I'll see," and never sent it. The card sat on the coffee table for the rest of the night. Eventually, I slid it back into the drawer, closed it, and turned off the lights. Lying in bed, I told myself again that I was fine, that I was independent, strong, free. But it didn't sound as convincing as it used to. The next morning at work, I couldn't shake the thought of Mike. All night, his name had looped in my head. Mike Reynolds' firm just signed a huge client. By midday, I gave in. I caught one of the guys I'd overheard in the break room, Jason, by the coffee machine. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "That company you mentioned yesterday? Mike Reynolds?" "What kind of firm is it exactly?" Jason brightened. "Oh, that? Tech Solutions. They've been growing like crazy. We've actually done a few campaigns for their clients. I pretended to scroll my phone, voice steady." "So he's doing well, huh?" Jason nodded. "Very. He's sharp. Speaks at conferences now, does those leadership panels. Actually, he might be at the regional networking thing next week. His team sponsors part of it." I smiled like it was no big deal. Huh? Small world. But inside, my chest tightened. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus. Every task felt mechanical. I told myself I was just curious, that it might be nice to say hello, see how he'd turned out. By the end of the week, I'd registered for the event. The ballroom was bright and buzzing when I walked in, polished name tags, clinking glasses, everyone angling for eye contact. I told myself I was there to network, But I knew the truth. I wanted to see him. I'd spent too long pretending not to care. Now, I needed to know. I drifted through the crowd, shaking hands, half listening to talk about budgets and ad metrics. I felt older somehow. Polished, but invisible. The younger attendees had that spark I used to have. Then I saw him, across the room, surrounded by a small group, laughing easily. He looked different, not the nervous guy who once asked me out, but a man completely comfortable in his skin. His suit fit perfectly, his posture straight, voice calm, but sure. The people around him hung on every word. For a second I froze. Part of me wanted to turn around and leave, but curiosity overpowered pride. I waited until his group thinned, then took a breath and walked over. "Mike." He turned, eyes lighting up in recognition. "Hey. Wow, it's been forever." "Yeah," I said. "Jason mentioned you might be here." "Ah, Jason. Good guy." "Yeah, we've done some work together. How have you been?" "Busy," I said automatically. "Work never stops." He smiled politely. "Still in marketing?" "Still grinding," I said. "Keeps me sharp." He nodded. "That's great." "You were always one of the focused ones," he said it kindly, but it landed like a quiet reminder that all I'd ever been was focused. He told me about his company, how it started small, how he built a solid team. The pride in his voice wasn't flashy. It was steady, earned. Before I could ask more, a woman joined us. She had calm eyes, soft brown hair pulled back, wearing a simple navy dress. She smiled at me as she slipped her hand into his. "Hi, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt," she said warmly. "I'm Lily." I shook her hand. "Nice to meet you." "Lily's my wife," Mike said. "We actually met through his company," she added, glancing up at him. "He kept fixing my laptop for free until I agreed to coffee." She laughed. I managed to join in, though it felt like my throat closed slightly each time she said, "My husband." They stood together naturally, without effort. She wasn't the loud, showy type. She didn't have to be. Her presence filled the space quietly, and he looked at her with the kind of familiarity that only comes from years of choosing each other. A few people stopped by to congratulate Mike on a recent award. "You're really setting the standard," one man said. Mike thanked him, introducing Lily each time. She smiled at everyone, proud but modest. When the crowd thinned again, he turned back to me. "It's really good seeing you," he said. "You look well." "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile. "You too. Congratulations on everything. The company, the award, all of it." He nodded. "It's been a good ride." "Busy, but worth it." He hesitated a second. "We've got 2 kids now. Keeps us grounded." "Kids?" I repeated softly. "Wow. That's great." He smiled. "Yeah, they're wild, but I can't imagine life without them." There was a comfortable pause. For him. For me, it felt like standing still while the room moved. "I should let you mingle," he said finally. "Take care of yourself, okay?" "You too, Mike." He squeezed my hand briefly before walking off with Lily. They disappeared into the crowd, her hand resting lightly on his arm, their laughter fading into the noise. When I got home that night, I dropped my purse on the counter and stood there for a minute, staring at nothing. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the couch. My mind kept replaying Mike's face, the way he smiled when he talked about his wife, his kids. I told myself it didn't mean anything. He just got lucky. That's all. If I'd stayed with him back then, he probably wouldn't have become that man. Maybe he needed to be rejected to find his drive. Maybe I even helped him. Besides, I have my career, my independence, my life on my terms. I worked hard for it, and I'm not apologizing for that. I don't have to measure my worth by someone else's ring or family photo. Still, as I looked around my apartment, the trophies from years of late nights, the framed certificates, the quiet, something about it felt hollow. Success had weight but no warmth. I told myself I was fine, that I'd made the right choice, that not everyone needs a family to feel complete. But when I caught my reflection in the window, wine glass in hand, I didn't look convinced. Maybe Mike found his happiness, and maybe I kind of found mine.